Nancy here with Paper Closet Designs. Welcome to my messy studio. I am so excited about today's video. I have a project that I've been working on for a little while and it's ready to go and I get to share it with you and I am so excited. So I love Halloween and I also think gnomes are just the cutest things, and so I have done a collection of Halloween gnomes. This has 4 different sets in it that you can purchase separately and they make a gnome family for Halloween. So let me show you the first 3 sets that I have. So the first one is our witch gnome. I don't know if you can see that or not. So this witch gnome is 10 inches tall, so they are a little bit bigger than the tiered tray sets. And she comes with a stand, but in her set, she also comes with a cauldron with its own stand. I haven't painted the back yet. And then a little sign, and actually it's not that little, it's a 6x3 inch sign that says broom parking, all others will be towed. So that is our witch gnome. The next one is the Frankenstein gnome, and he is just super cute. I think he might be my favorite. I don't know, I'm probably going to say that about all of them. So our Frankenstein gnome is almost 11 inches tall, and I think he's about 5 inches wide. So he's a little bit bigger even than the witch. And he's just so cute. And he's got the layered boots and everything on him. And in his set, he comes with the ghost gnome that's hiding behind a pumpkin. So he's got his little hat on and he's hiding back there behind the pumpkin and the eyes. So these are all separate pieces. And then the last one that I'll show you that's finished is our vampire gnome. So he has a hat with a bat and he's holding a bat and he has his little vampire teeth. And then in his set, it comes with a moon, because you have to have a moon for the vampire, with some bats and stars on it, and it has a base as well. And then he also has the little tombstone with a bat and it says trick or treating, and it's all layered, and it also has a back or a stand on the back. I have made all of my pieces so that if you want to do some really fancy detailed painting, you can, which is what I'm going to show you today with the wizard gnome. That's the one that we're going to do. And so you can do all this little detailed painting, but there also have enough details in the wood and the cutout pieces that if you don't want to do all the decorative painting, you don't need to. You can just paint the individual pieces and glue it together and it will be fine. So we're going to start with this one today. This is our wizard gnome and he includes a little frog. So there's the frog, and the frog has its own stand. And it also includes a fence with a pumpkin and some stars on that as well. Now, before we jump into this, let me just share a couple of tips with you. So I have base painted all of these already. And when I base paint, I just use a makeup sponge. And I usually even cut them in half unless I'm doing a big area. So these go a long ways, and I like using makeup sponges for a couple of different reasons. I like to do 2 or 3 really light layers on my wood because I think it just looks a little bit better with the lighter layers built up. And so I use the sponge for that, but it also keeps you from getting paint on the side or the edge of your project. Now you can always paint the edges of your projects if you like it. Some people do. I usually leave mine unpainted because I like that kind of burnt wood look on there. So that is completely up to you. Also, you can paint the backs if you want to, or you can leave them unfinished. It probably depends on where you're going to display them and what you're going to do with them if you want to do the backs. Some tools that you'll need if you decide you want to do the detailed painting. So I use a chip brush, and a lot of these tools that I'm going to show you I actually just got at the dollar store. You could pick them up at Walmart or wherever. So I'm going to use a chip brush, and I will tell you as we use that what I've used it for. Toothbrushes, you can either use an old one or you can go pick up some super cheap ones at your dollar store or grocery store or wherever. I have quite a few of these. You will want a stylus. which is just a tool that has two balls, one on each end. If you don't have a stylus and you're not sure if you really want to invest in one, they're not expensive. But if you don't have one, you can take a sewing pin with the ball head and just put it on like the end of a pencil, and you can use that as well. I also have a little pick tool. I use this for cleaning out anything that has already been scored into the wood. So like on my broom parking where it says all others will be towed and the broom, I would use this if I accidentally got paint in there to clean it out. So we're gonna keep that on hand. Then I use, if you go to the paint store and buy these, they're called a stippling brush, and they just are a round flat brush with a lot of bristles. This is actually a makeup sponge that I bought at the dollar store, and I use this for stippling. And we're gonna use this on the frog and some other things, so I'll show you that. And then last but not least, you may want a really thin brush with just a really thin, tiny edge. Or if you would rather, you can invest in, I thought I had mine out and I don't. You can invest in those little paint markers. I like to use this, but I know a lot of people would prefer doing the paint marker. So either one is fine. And then of course you'll need something to put your paint on and a paper towel. So we are ready to go. Let's just jump right in and get this done. So I'm going to start with our little pumpkin on the fence. And I'm going to move these pieces to the side. And the first thing I'm going to do is I want to give our fence a little bit of texture. Excuse me. So I'm going to grab, this is painted in the dark gray, so I'm going to grab some black. Let me see if I can arrange this so that you can see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to put a little dot of black paint. And I paint with pea-sized drops because I don't like to waste paint. And a lot of times if you put a big blob of paint on your paint palette, you're going to throw half of it away. So I'd rather put down more blobs than waste a lot of paint. So I'm going to take my chipboard or my chip brush, and I'm going to just tap it in that paint, and then I'm going to tap it on my paper towel, and I'm going to try and get most of the paint off. And when it starts just leaving little pieces or little flecks, that's when it's ready to go. So let's move those pieces out of the way. And now I'm just going to stroke my fence with the paint that's on there. And you'll notice that it's still kind of light, which is what I want. I'd much rather go over it a couple of times than have to, you know, get a towel and wipe some of it off or whatever. So I just dotted it in the paint, took most of the paint off. And then I'm just going back and forth to give it kind of a distressed wood look. Whoops, wrong part. There you go. And just keep doing that until you get the look that you want on it. You can go heavy or light. I kind of do like a medium. Again, that's just your taste if you like it a little bit heavier. And I kind of like that. I think we're going to stop right there. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a makeup brush, and I've cut this one in half. I already used the back side of it, but I'm going to pick up some paint and then kind of brush most of the paint off. And then I'm just going to go around the edges really light to kind of give it a highlight. Whoops, and if you get a little too much, you can wipe it off with your finger. I don't know how long this video is going to take because we're going to try and do all of the detailed painting on all three pieces from our wizard gnome. So if you get bored, you can fast forward through some of this. But I thought it would be helpful. I get lots of emails and questions about how did I get this effect or how did I get that effect. I used to teach tool painting classes a long time ago, way back in the day. And so I've kept some of those techniques, but I've tried to really simplify things because I think people just want a fun project that looks good but doesn't take a lot of time. So that is my fence, and we're gonna call it good enough. I don't normally do this bases. You can if you want to. I don't normally do it. So we're gonna set that aside. And then I'm gonna do the same thing, or the highlights, with my pumpkin and my leaf. So on the pumpkin, I am actually going to use yellow because I wanna kind of highlight it, and yellow is highlights the orange really well. So I'm just gonna, again, put a little drop and pick up a sponge, a little half sponge, pick up some paint, kind of wipe it off, and then I just go around the edge. And that's all there is to this highlighting. And again, you can go heavier if you'd like, a little bit lighter. Just depends on the look that you want. I do tell people when they're in my class that if you like it, stop. Don't keep adding. Because what happens is we like it and we think, oh, that looks good. It's going to look even better with more. And then we get more on there and it doesn't look good anymore. It's not kind of what we wanted. And don't worry if it's not the same thickness all the way around. In fact, you really don't want it to be. You want it to kind of look natural. And if you get a little sponge mark, it's fine. Just keep. Okay, we've got one more piece on that leaf, or on the pumpkin. And if you didn't want to do this with yellow, you could do it with brown and make it look darker instead of the lighter. I'm wondering, yeah. On my jack-o'-lantern, I did the lighter too, so I was gonna show you. Okay, so there is my pumpkin pieces. And then I'm not gonna worry about my stem because it's so dark, but I am gonna do the leaf. We're gonna do that with a darker green. Just a couple of more painting tips. When I paint orange, when I paint something orange, I always give it a yellow coat first, because if you really want that yellow to or that orange to pop, if you go over it with a little bit of yellow beforehand, you'll be a lot happier with it, I promise. And then on this particular file, the frog, I've done 3 green colors on him, or I will have done by the time I get done. So I'm going to take this darkest green. I did the same thing. I kind of wiped it off. And I'm just going to go around the edge. Okay. So that looks good. I'm not going to worry about my stars. I think they're fine. Let's go ahead and glue those pieces together. And this does have a stand, so you may, I don't put it in the stand to begin with, but you're going to want to make sure that you get your pumpkin up high enough that it will still fit in the stand. But it's only going to be about 1/4 of an inch above. So I'm going to start with my middle piece. Just put some glue on, well, not that much. And I'm going to put him right there in the middle of the fence. Excuse me. And then we're going to put our other 2 pieces on. And the jack-o'-lantern that the ghost is holding goes together pretty much the same way. It just has the pieces for the eyes cut out. In fact, I'll show you here. So there's my pumpkin. Let me get my ghost again. So on this, there's 3 layers. So there's the back layer, which is the pumpkin. Well, there's the back layer, which is the ghost and the pumpkin. And then there's a full layer of the pumpkin. And then there's that middle piece, and the eyes and the face are actually cut out of it, kind of like a puzzle piece. So it's a little bit different, but also a lot of the same. Okay, so our pumpkin's on there. Next, I'm going to glue my stem. And I did not highlight my stem on this one. You could if you wanted to. And it just goes right down there. And then our little leaf. And now that I've got it glued on there, I'm going to add a couple of highlight dots onto my leaf and my pumpkin. So, and again, this is totally optional. I'll get that in there so it fits right. Totally optional. I'm going to take my stylus and I'm going to take the small dot. I'm just going to pick up some ink, not ink, excuse me, some paint. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to put a couple of little dots on my leaf just to give it some detail. And then I'm going to do the same thing on my pumpkin, only this time I'm going to use the bigger dot. I'm going to just poke it in there and get some paint on it. And you can just do this randomly, whatever you would like. Just like that. Okay, we're going to set that aside for a minute and let it dry. While I'm doing that, I am going to glue my stand together. Can you see me? Am I in the camera? I have to move the camera depending on what I'm doing, if I'm doing paper or paint, and then I get out of the camera range. All right, so there's our stand. I'm going to set it aside. Okay, next up, let's do our little frog. And he has the potential to be so cute. He's already cute. He really is. But this is the one I said that I'm going to do it in 3 colors of green. So I painted the top pieces in my lightest green. And I painted, oh, let's go back to the pumpkin. I forgot to glue my little stars on there. Whoops. I want to do that really quick. Sorry. I'm going to just really quick so that they can be dry when I go to flick him. All right. Okay, back to the frog. So I have the medium green on the stand and the frog base, and then I did the lighter green on the frog body pieces, and then white and black. So let's just jump in. I'm going to sit down and hopefully keep this in the camera so that I know what I'm doing. Okay, so we're going to start with our back. And this time I'm going to get the darkest green that I have, which I've already put on my plate, and my little sponge, and just kind of brush that off. And then I'm going to just highlight his tummy and his legs. Very simple and not too heavy. Don't worry about his face because that's all going to be covered up. And then this down here is actually going to be where the base is. So you don't need to worry about that. Okay, now I'm going to take some white. There's my white paint. And I'm going to take that little stipple, that little stippling brush, or my makeup brush. And I'm going to pick up some paint, and then I'm going to tap and get as much of that off as I can, because I want this to be really, really light. Okay, I'm going to come and get his face, and I'm just going to put a little bit. See, whoops, it's still too dark. So take more paint off. Just want really light. Keep taking it off till it gets to where you want it. Maybe I'll bounce it on the desk. All right, that's getting better. And we're just gonna really lightly highlight the side of his face, and maybe just down here along his neck a little bit. And when you're doing this with white, it will show up really bright. That's why you want to take most of that paint off. It's because you don't want to look at that and say, oh, there's a whole bunch of white gobs right there on the edge. You just want it to look like a highlight and not all over. Okay, we're going to take the middle of his tummy, and I'm going to go down the middle with that white. And I'm keeping it light. If you need to go pick up some more paint, go ahead, but keep it light because it's easier to add than it is to subtract. And that's good. I don't know how well this is picking up on the camera, but it looks it looks really good. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing with his legs. Got a lot on there that time. And we're just going to highlight and highlight. Okay. So that looks good. With this, excuse me, I'm fighting a cold. With a little bit of the white paint still on it, I'm going to come back over to my darker, and I'm just going to barely add some highlights in the corners. Right there. It got on his face a little bit, but that's fine. And then on his knee. Right there, just a little bit. Okay, that's even maybe too much. Okay, I'm gonna try and get as much of that paint out. I don't wanna wet it. I don't usually wet these brushes until I'm completely done with them. So I do have 2 or 3 on hand if I'm gonna be switching a lot of colors. I'm gonna take most of that out because we are going to do another color. Excuse me. Okay, let's take our red and we're going to put some little cheeks on our frog face. So again, just a tiny drop is all we need because this is the only thing we're using this for. And even that is in excess. I'm going to get as much of that off as I can. I like these mats, so they're just my, I also quilt, and so they're my cutting mats, and when they start to get a little bit old from sewing and not working real well with my rotary cutter, then I bring them in here and I use them as painting mats. Okay, so I've got just a little bit off that. I'm going to use the round shape, and I'm going to put cheeks on the end of his smile. And his smile is also just scored from the wood. So when you get the file, it's a score line. And I'm just gonna keep pouncing until I get it. That looks good to me. Less is more, less is more. So that looks really good. Okay, let's take the medium green and we are gonna highlight the light green. So let me pull out my medium green. And get another sponge that I can use. I think I can do this one. Oops. Take most of that off. And we are just going to go around all the edges of this lighter green on his body. Now, if you are a tool painter and you know how to float, if you know how to do it, you'll know what I'm talking about. You can do that instead of doing the edges. And I do that quite often when I'm selling these at craft shows or something. But for this, I think it's so much easier and it looks the same. Excuse me. It looks the same as when you do it with the edge of the brush if you take most of your paint off. If you get a big gobby paint, it's not gonna look quite right. And then we're gonna go around his face. I'm not gonna worry about his eyes because there's so much going on. I might try and do just like a little bit right in there in the crest, but mostly I'm gonna get his cheeks and down around his neck. Okay, now let's go ahead and glue him together before we add the detailed dots. So on the fence and the pumpkin, I put the dots on after I glued it down. I'm going to do the same thing with my frog, and in almost all of my files I do that after I glue it on, because it takes a minute for those dots to dry, and you don't want to touch one and smear it and make a mess while you're trying to glue them down. So let's go ahead and glue our face down. And I just used some wood glue. It's called Super Glue Wood Glue. I want to make sure you can see this still in the mirror. Okay, so we've got his little face down. Then we're going to do his tummy. And actually, let's make sure that his face is all lined up. Because once that dries, if you're not lined up, it kind of makes a paint, you can see it. And I'll show you on the hat what I'm really talking about. Okay, so we're going to add his little body. And then we're going to add his legs. I'm going to hold this up really close to the screen. If you notice, there's like a little tiny dip on both sides. That little 1/8 of an inch is what fits into the stand. And so when you glue his legs on, you want it above that little ridge line. I hope that made sense. When you see it cut out and it's up close, it'll make sense. So there's one leg, there's 2 legs. I just think this frog is so cute. He was a lot of fun to design and put together. Okay, now we're going to add some highlight dots with our stencil. And I am going to start with I'm going to start with the medium green. And I'm going to add the medium green onto the light green. And you can do as many as you want, and you can do whichever size you want. I'm doing the bigger ball. Might have to get some more paint. And I'm going to do some between his eyes, just kind of like on the nose. And these are really random. Really, really random. And then I'm going to do some on the cheeks. I need to get a little bit more paint. It's not picking up quite enough. Oh, I forgot to glue his eyeballs in. Let's do that. So we're going to glue the outside of the eye because I don't want to mash those dots. You guys will watch this video and think, she doesn't know what she's doing. She's not very organized. I do know what I'm doing. My hands work faster than my brain sometimes. And then we're going to glue the irises in there. And they might need to be spun around just a little bit so that they fit in just exactly the way that they were cut out. Come on. Oh, goodness. There we go. Okay, now let's do those green dots. I'm going to do some on his cheeks. I think I'll do probably 3. Okay, and then I'm going to do some randomly on his belly. And then let's do some on his knee as well. Isn't he just the cutest little frog? I think he is adorable. So he is done other than the stand, and we're going to do some flecking in a minute, but we're going to set him aside and we're going to start on the wizard. Okay, so first thing that I need to tell you, make sure he's in the screen and that you can see this, is on almost all of the wizards other than the Frankenstein, you're going to have some pieces that has an S cut out of them. What these are is they are spacers. So let me show you on the witch what happens. So on the witch, you have a full piece. On all the gnomes, excuse me, you have a full piece. This is your background. And then you're going to have some layers. So we've got the layer of hair, and then we have the layer of the broom. And the broom is actually laying on the hair and the shoes. And the same with the broomstick. It's laying on the hair. So you'll need a piece that lays in between the body and the rest of the broom and the hands. So on the witch, when you have this file, it's going to almost look like a leaf. It's a straight line, and it's got two little almost like leaf things on it, and they say an S. It's one piece. That is your spacer that goes underneath the broom and your hands, because your hands are separate pieces so that you can paint them separately. And you would glue the spacer on, and then you would glue the broom and the hands on. And the vampire has one, the ghost does not, and the Frankenstein does not, but our wizard also has one. And that is because he's going to hold the stars, and so you'll need that little spacer piece. And there's actually two of them to make your hands stand out. So anytime you cut out one of my files and it has a little S on it, that just means it's a spacer piece. And you don't even need to paint these. You can if you want to, but they're not going to be seen. They're going to be covered. So we're not even going to paint them. We're going to set them aside. So we have on our little gnome, our little wizard, we have two hands and the nose. And then we have the star garland that he's holding, and it's got one solid piece and then a piece that goes on top. Then we have all of these little stars that are cut out to go, or they're cut out of his hat. If you wanted to, if you did not want to cut all those little pieces, you could just paint behind here your solid piece. I didn't paint it, but you could paint it purple or red or whatever, and then when you laid that on there, those colors would show through. But I like the different colors of stars. So we have his hat, we have his beard and his mustache, and we have his shoes, and then we have his body. And again, I didn't paint up behind his hat because it's all going to be covered. So let's go ahead and, just like the frog, we're going to highlight his body. This was done with the lightest green, and I'm going to highlight his body with the darkest green this time, because I really want to give him some depth. So I'm going to just pick up a little bit of that dark green, take most of the paint off, and then we're just going to go around. A lot of his body you're not going to see. So I'm going to go kind of around where the neck is and where the legs would be. And that is all, because his hands and his feet and everything else will be covered. Whoops, that one was a little bit much. But we're in a hurry. We'll leave it as is. Okay, next up, let's do, slide those out. Let's do his beard. Oh, and he also has two little stands, and I've already painted those. I painted the stands to match his shoes. Okay, so we have a beard and a mustache, but we want to make those kind of look older and gray them up. So I've painted them white. I'm going to take my lightest gray color that I have. It's not the one that I did the fence. It's a little bit lighter. And we're going to do that chip brush again. So I put a little bit of drop of paint on there. Let's move some of this out of the way. We're getting messy. We're going to pick that up. We're going to get as much of that off as we can. And for the mustache, I'm going to drag it going out. And I just keep going over it until I get the look that I want. Flip it, and we're going to go out this way. You could go even heavier if you wanted. If you wanted him to have a really dark gray beard, you could go heavier. Or on, let's see, where did my vampire go? So on my vampire, I did the opposite. I painted it gray first, and then I added the white on it. So whichever look you like, go ahead and do that. Then we're going to do the same thing with the beard. And usually I start in the middle and work my way out. And we want it darker than that, so I'm going to go back and get some more paint, tap it off, do the same again. And like I said, I'm kind of going medium. You could go a lot heavier if you wanted to, or a lot lighter. Okay, I like that. I'm going to take the dark gray now that I painted the fence in. Where did my dark gray go? There it is. And I'm going to highlight the edges with the dark gray. Let's put a little on there. Get another brush. Wipe as much of that off as we can. This is why when I start doing the detail painting, I usually get a new paint tray because I need lots of room. I'm just gonna kind of brush that on there. Okay, and then let's do the beard. Take that off. And I think the beard and the mustache are good. I'm going to set that aside. Let's do our hands and our nose. So these I'm going to actually do with the orange. I'm going to highlight them a little bit with the orange. And again, we're going a darker color onto a lighter color. So we want to take as much of that off, excuse me, as we can. And then just really lightly go all the way around. I'm going to try and get in the crevice there just a little bit. I don't want it to go too much because it's holding the stars, and I actually painted my stars orange that he's holding. So I don't want it to look like the color from the stars just runs right onto his hand. So it's not going to, but we're going to keep it kind of light. And then we're going to do his nose. And then to keep that color from running into it, I'm going to take my lightest gray. Actually, I'm going to take yellow. And I'm just barely going to pick some up. We're going to add just a little bit of yellow, kind of randomly. In fact, I'm adding the yellow so light, you almost can't see that it's there. It is, but you can hardly see it because I'm just doing it so super light. So what is, or how do you decorate for Halloween? Do you like the bloody horror scary stuff? Do you like the cutesy, the kids friendly? There's so many different ways to do Halloween. I personally like the cutesy, but whatever. In fact, if you like the scary, you could do these still and just do them in some really dark muted colors and make them a little bit scary. Okay, let's take our orange star, and we're going to highlight this with the yellow. Is that the yellow sponge I was using? Oh, that end is dry. Let's get a different end that's working. There we go. And you don't need to do this bigger one because it's going to be covered up by the purple square or the purple star. So we're just kind of little bit of yellow to it, very lightly. And all of these techniques that I'm showing you, how to do the dots, how to do the highlights, and here in a minute we'll do the speckling. You can do all of them on your project or none of them. Or like I said at the beginning of the video, if you like to just paint them a solid color and glue them together, there's enough detail in the wood that you are fine to do that as well. I have lots of people that that's what they want to do. Okay, let's get our black and we are going to highlight super lightly on our purple star. In fact, I don't even need any. I've still got enough on there on my plate. Most of that off. You could also do your purple star with white if you wanted to. Maybe that's what I should have done. I might go back over it with a little bit of white. Get those edges. And then we'll play. We'll see if we like it or not. Okay, so you could just leave it with the dark, with the black, or we can highlight it with some white if we want to. Again, take most of that off. Yeah, I kind of like that. You can highlight the stars that go in his hat. I'm not going to. I don't think they need it. But if you wanted to, you could. So now we need to do the shoes and the hat. And I'm going to do these with both white and gray. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my sponge with the lightest gray color on it. And I'm going to just go around the edge a little bit. And then I'm going to do that same thing on the shoes. Let me finish the hat here. Whoa, 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 don't want it that dark. Okay. You'll see that I just make lots of mistakes as I'm going, and they still work great. Okay, so on the shoes, we're just going to do the upper part because this part right here is going to be covered by the next layer of wood. So I'm just doing right across the top. And into that little, I don't know, cleavage or whatever on the shoes. And then I'm going to do the same with this piece. And it's rounded on the top and straight on the bottom. So you'll know which direction it goes. A little bit more pink. We're about out of the gray, which is fine because we're about done with it. All right. Before I go on to the white, I'm going to glue my little gnome together first because I'm going to add some highlights with the white writing or the white brush. And again, I don't want to smear them once I start putting the glue on. So when you glue your gnomes, especially if they have the point at the top of the hat, you're going to want to do that first so that that point matches up. Otherwise, it's going to look like you have horns or a shadow behind your hat. So I just lay that down, and then I'm actually going to pick it up and look at it and make sure that those are all nice and even on the top. Slide it around, make sure everything is matching up, and it does. Okay, then we're going to add our beard. And make sure you don't push your hat off while you're lining up your beard. And then let's add the shoe base. And again, just like the frog, there's a little bit of a ledge right there, and that's what fits inside your stand. So you want to make sure that the base of your shoes are above that. And it's that way for all of the gnomes and for the ghost gnome. Okay, so we're going to just make sure that's lined up. I don't know if you can see that or not. So we still have that little edge that's going to fit inside our stand. And while we're talking about our stand, I'm going to go ahead and glue it together so that it is dry when we need to put our gnome in there. Set that aside. Okay, and then we're going to take our base, not our base, the bottom of our shoes, the sole of our shoes. Glue it down there. Okay, let's take our mustache next, our mustache and our nose. And let's make sure that they're going to line up before we glue them on there. Okay, now we need to do our hands and our spacers and our star banners. So what you're going to do is the spacers get glued on right there where the little hand cutout on the back of the piece goes. And like I said, these don't show, so it doesn't, you don't have to worry too much about them getting in the exact right spot. There we go. Okay, now before we glue anything else on, we're going to put our hands on, and we're going to take our star banner, and it's supposed to fit right inside those hand pieces. So we want to, oops, except I'm doing it backwards. We want to make sure that it's all going to fit before we glue anything down, because if you glued your hands down and then they didn't fit on your star, you'd not be very happy. All right. And I'm wondering, I do think I did that upside down, because I thought the star, yep, I did. I'm going to do it this way, because the star goes up. There we go. Okay, now that we've got that, I'm going to glue my star down first, and then I'm going to make sure that those hands fit right where they should. So, all right, I don't know if you can see that. I've taken it out of the camera view again. Okay, now, so I don't know if you can see that part or not. So there is our spacers, and I've glued them down, and then I've put my star down, and now I'm going to glue my hands down. And then you have this last star, and you can either line it up so that it matches exactly. Let me see if you can see this in here. Okay, so you can line it up, or you can twist it, whatever you want, whatever look you want to go for. I'm going to just line it right up there like that. Okay, now let's drag him down a little bit. Now we have our stars, and these stars, we've got one purple one that goes on his shoe. And then the rest of them go in his hat. And they are all the same exact size. They fit, everything should fit together, but you might have to turn them just a little bit to get them into your hat. So we're going to start with this purple. I'm going to put a dot of glue in there. And see, if they don't fit, it's because the stars themselves are not perfectly symmetrical. So you just turn them until they pop in there. All right, so I turned that off so you didn't have to watch me twist and turn all those stars. They all fit in there just fine. You just might have to turn them a little bit until they slide right down in. Okay, so once he's put together, we're gonna go ahead and finish our details, and I'm gonna get some white paint. I'm gonna bring my paint palette over here. And just a drop. And I'm going to take my really skinny brush. And again, if you don't have a really skinny brush, you can use the paint markers, but they're not as thin as a tiny brush will be. So your lines will be a little bit bigger. And I'm just gonna pick up some paint. And then I'm gonna draw some little squiggly lines on his hat to kind of give it a little definition. Don't worry if they're not perfect. They shouldn't be. We don't want perfection, we want cute. And I'm gonna do a little bit up here along the hat. If you can see that. And then we're gonna do the same thing on his shoes. So I'm just gonna pick up a little more paint. And I'm gonna kind of draw it across his shoes. Oops. And up down along the sole of his shoes. Oops. Okay. And then I'm going to take my stylus and add a few white dots. Where'd my stylus go? Add a few on his hat. A couple on his beard or his mustache. A couple more down here on his beard. A couple on his nose. The top of his hands. Maybe some along the star here. And definitely some on his shoes. Okay, that is enough. Less is more. Always, always remember that. Less is more. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stipple all three of these pieces. And I stipple my pieces before I put them on their stands. Oh, I need to glue my frog stand together. I thought I had. So I stipple mine before I put them on the stands so that they're laying flat when I do this. You can put them on the stands and then stipple them as well. But what will happen is you'll get stippling on the front of the stands, but not on the back unless you flip them over. And I really apologize for my voice today. Okay, to stipple, you're going to take your paintbrush and you want your towel, your paper towel. We're going to get a little blob of paint. I always start with black. I'm going to put a little blob of black paint on there. This is a messy job, but it's so fun. I'm going to take our paintbrush and I'm going to just smash it down there in that paint. If you want to practice on your paper towel, that's why it's here. But all you're going to do is run your thumb across it so that you get some black speckling. Now, I know that if you watch some YouTube videos, some people will add a little bit of water to it. I don't. I just do the paint. And then I'm just going to flick it across. Start light. You can always add more, but it's almost impossible to take it off if you have too much. And I definitely want some more. Can you see what it's doing? It doesn't really show up on the black, but it shows up on everything else and just gives it a little detail. And again, you can do as much or as little as you want. You'll definitely want something underneath your project because it gets everywhere. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with white, and I'm going to take another paintbrush, a clean paintbrush, so that I don't get gray speckles. I'm going to add some white to my mat. Pick that up. I just think this adds so much cuteness to your project. Oh, there goes my dog. He's barking at something. And now we are ready to glue these together, and they are all finished. So let's start with our frog. We've got our little stand right here. I'm going to put some glue. Oh, I got a big chunk of white. And add some glue to the front and the back. You do want a glue that's going to dry clear and not shiny when you do this. Then I'm just going to slip it right in there into that stand and then let him dry. Okay, next up is our fence. Same thing. A little on the front, a little on the back. Slip him in. And then last but not least is our gnome. Before I glue that, I want to show you our Frankenstein gnome so you can see what I'm talking about. So on all of them, the little slot is in the middle. On the Frankenstein gnome, it's not quite exactly in the middle because he has a few more layers than the others. And so the slot is just a hair towards the back. So when you get this open, let me see if I can show you on the bottom. When you get this cut out and you go to paint it, you'll notice that the slot is not quite even. Where it's shorter or thinner, that's the back of your stand, just because he has a few more layers. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to put some glue right on there, a little on the back. And again, I don't normally paint my backs because they're usually for display and pictures, and where I put them on my shelf at home, the backs don't show. But if your backs are going to show, you might want to paint it. Just let him sit. And there is our wizard gnome with the fence and the little frog that is so cute. And he just goes really well with the rest of our wizard Halloween family. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. I hope you'll give at least one of these guys a try. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed my video. Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos, and have a great day.